So I've had a lot of clients and even people outside of those who I coach who comment on how I ask, in their words, great questions, questions that are challenging and really make them think, questions that help them to unlock new perspectives. Now, first, I want to give credit to the person who is willing to field those types of questions, right? They are willing to slow down, to pause. They're willing to think deeply instead of maybe just talking around and staying caught in their own story. They're willing to be open to those questions, and they're also, willing to go beyond just maybe asking for advice. So it takes a lot to field a great question. Secondly, I want to give credit to the incredible coach education that I received at Georgetown University. I would say I was very committed beforehand to asking great questions. I studied it, I read books, but it wasn't until I actually had formal training in their executive coaching program that I really started to become more skilled at it. And still a lot of improvement to be made, as my family would attest to, definitely my wife. Anyways, this is one of the many reasons I've actually started back facilitating the TOC leadership retreats. We've kickstarted those back in 2025. If you follow the newsletter, you would have seen that a few of them are on the schedule. But the purpose of these retreats, one of the many purposes or one of the many reasons, is to bring leaders together who want to be more effective in their coaching, not just of athletes, but of other coaches. Maybe they're an athletic director or administrator, but it's also some executives and leaders. So it's coaching team members and employees. It's such a complex and unique skill that it takes some kind of specialized training. However, I think Tiffany Gaskell today in the second part of our conversation is really going to give us a lot that's going to help you right now go and be better at asking questions with a purpose and an intent to really help other people grow, which honestly is the first framework she's going to unpack for us is called the Grow Framework from Performance Consulting, the Performance Consultants. So she's going to unpack the Grow Framework, and she's also going to talk about a few topics that I really personally had some questions around that I think also relate to sports coaches, which is how do you coach uncoachable people, and a few other topics that I know you'll enjoy and appreciate. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast, where we're dedicated to helping you unlock your leadership potential and create winning team environments. My name is JP Nurbin. My co-hosts, Betsy Butterick and Nate Sanderson, sat this interview out, but they'll be back in our next episode. Now, each week, we bring you practical tips and strategies to elevate your coaching. For more, if you enjoy this podcast, be sure to check out our online courses and our books at tocculture.com and betsybutterick.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter at tocculture.com for weekly culture building insights. In this, the GROW model, goal, reality, options, and will, it's like you said, it's one of the most popular, if not the most popular coaching model. What makes the leader in this situation who uses this model, what makes it truly effective, right? I mean, because I'm sure anybody can say, okay, I'm going to sit down and ask these questions. What is absolutely critical for a leader using this model for them to be effective when coaching and leading their people?
Yeah. So John Whitmore created the model, and he, as our founder, right? I had the honor of working with him for about 15 years before he passed away. And what he used to say was, he said, look, the GROW model is great, and it's as good as your coaching skills are. So, any dictator could use GROW. Mm-hmm. And so coming back to your question of what sits around, GROW being great. When I described it just then, I was talking about asking questions. So that's the first thing, asking questions. And so it is learner-centric. So the person you're talking to is the one who is driving it. They're the ones who are filling out the content, if you like. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing is you're creating a facilitative structure for them to walk through. And the thing about being a transformational leader is that you might have ideas about how you would do it, but you cannot bring those ideas to how they need to do it. You need to give them complete space to do that. And that is that partnering style. So giving them that, listening to where they're at, it's all those great coaching skills that we know of, leadership mindset being key, believing that this person is full of potential on a learning journey, and going to bring something really unique. And that's your job as leader, to bring their uniqueness out.
It's one of these things where oftentimes I might have a call with a leader I'm working with, and they might say, "Oh, I had a great conversation with so and so," and I'm always asking, "Well, what percentage were you talking? What percentage were they talking?" As I'm that's just a simple way to gauge what type of conversation that was. Like, was it just them sitting down, laying down all the advice from all these truths, and they're sharing their wisdom, which there's definitely time for mentorship. But what you're talking about there is where we're just present, curious, asking questions. What's hard oftentimes about that is, I would say, two things for people, leaders, in my experience, personal experience as well, is we see like the solution. We think we see the solution. We think we see the solution. We're like, oh, it would be just so much quicker for everyone, and we could save ourselves all this sweat and hard work if I just gave them the solution. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing is when we feel like they are completely blind to the truth, the reality of, they think they're working hard, they think they're headed towards their goal of NBA or NFL, and they're so far off of it. And I have to come in and tell them the actual truth because they're completely lost. So how do leaders deal with that? That first off, that pull to, ooh, I got to jump in here and I got to give them the solution, or that, "Ah, man, I got to save them from their blindness." What's the work there for leaders?
In the first one, where the leader wants to give advice, these new skills, so this new approach is going to feel like you are sitting on your hands. That's what it's going to feel like, first of all. And so it can be really uncomfortable for leaders to do that. However, the huge payoff is that as a result, that person will have discovered how to do it for themselves, and they will not be coming to ask you about that thing next time. So time-wise, it's a complete winner. There's a myth about coaching not take time. Oh, by the way, I have to just say that a great question as a leader to have in your back pocket for those moments is, if I wasn't here, what would you do?
Mm.
And I tell you what, I had a CEO who asked me that question every time I went to him. And that built my muscle to be able to deal with every situation. And I just stopped going to him because I had it covered. So it really, I have learned myself that grows and develops.
Yeah, and then that second one where you feel they're completely blind to something.
Mm.
At what point do we take the coaching hat off and then put on that mentor, you know, that comes in and says, actually, you're headed down this path here. Like, you've asked the questions, they just don't have the awareness. Like, what point do you take the hat off and step in to be that mentor?
The way that I would think about that is, well, I'm thinking about it in two ways. One is that as a coach, so I might say, so this person, has it, and they are creative, resourceful, and whole, and full of potential. And so I would just share with them, what I'm noticing is this, and just see how that lands. And it's interesting because when you do that, quite often there'll be a, oh yeah, I know about that, or, whatever that is. Quite often. If I'm in a leadership position and I'm seeing that, then I will have an open and honest conversation about what I'm noticing. And this is my perspective, right? It's not right or wrong. It's just my perspective. And I will share it with that person. And I will find out what their perspective is. Yeah, I'll get curious. Curiosity. That's the great one.
And see, I love that. To highlight that, it's like, oh, I have this feedback for this person. I have this truth. But yet you recognize, you said it's your perspective, it's your truth. And so you're sharing your truth. I'm noticing, or I'm thinking this, but then you stay curious. And I think this is one of the biggest keys to feedback, is that oftentimes I think as leaders, we think we give the feedback and then the feedback conversation's over, right? And it's all about them to how they handle that feedback. Do they take it or do they reject it? And yet when you're talking about it, it's just the start of the conversation. Like
Mm.
we get curious on how they handle that, how they respond to that, what their thoughts are on that, bit of feedback that you gave them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, don't even get me started on feedback, because the words, "I've got some feedback for you," I mean, they must be the most threaded words, in a working environment, right? And how on earth can that create learning and enjoyment and, fulfillment of the goal? How can that happen? So what we need to do is we need to retrain our leadership to do feedback in a collaborative way. This is just my perception, and I want to know what your perception is, and then we'll work it out together. And by the way, there is going to be learning in that for me as well, because I'm part of this whole thing. It's not you've done it and you're to blame. That whole finger pointing thing. We work a lot in high reliability organizations. So these are oil and gas organizations, places where in the workplace, people could be harmed as a result of accidents that could happen. In these environments, they understand how culture drives performance. And actually, the performance curve is inspired by work in that sector. And so what they do is they realize that blame stops learning. Because what happens with blame is once you've said, "Oh, it was your fault," the whole curiosity stops. So what happens then is it's his fault. He's gone. That's the end of it. And now we can get on with the next thing. There's no learning there. And that is why in those organizations, they do understand this whole nuance around feedback. And so they are proactively looking to create that different approach to feedback and creating a learning organization. And it is top of their agenda because it has such an impact for their people.
Yeah, I like how you really brought blame into it, because that's really honestly the difference I often see between, like, because I really oftentimes am challenging and encouraging leaders to take responsibility, ownership, and yet they're feeling like, well, so does that mean I'm blaming myself? And it's like, no, you're just at the end of the day, it really is about being curious, right? You're just staying curious of what have I done to create conditions in this environment for this development? What have we all done, right? It's just all of us being curious around that aspect. When you think about these great questions, right? You've been talking about questions and you're trying to talk about conversations around feedback and learning. One thing that I hear time and time again from sports coaches is they say, my people just tell me what I want to hear. They don't feel that they're genuinely sharing their real perspective on it. They're just telling the leader what they want to hear. What advice do you give that leader in that situation, that's feeling that is true?
Yeah. So what we've talked about in this podcast so far is we've talked about awareness and responsibility. And so one of the reasons we created that performance curve is so that people, leaders, can understand what culture am I creating. And so in that book, this book, the 6th edition, there's a table in there, where all the behaviors that you might find in those different cultures are listed. And that one of people saying what they want the leader, that they think the leader wants to hear, that is a behavior from the hierarchical culture. So what's happening there is that, and this is tough, right? This is tough for leaders, because it's to think that there isn't the psychological safety or isn't the room there for people to say what they actually think. And so, however, awareness is curative, as John always said. And so once you're aware of it, you can then make a choice and you can become responsible for it, and you can actively move from and retrain, your team, your organization from that hierarchical into the interdependent, to the highest performing culture, where you hear all the information, which means that you can make better decisions because you're better informed with your team.
Yeah. So coaches that are aspiring to be transformational are trying to build, let's just say, let's get maybe a few things there. Let's say they're already trying to build relationships. They've communicated a vision for this type of culture where they do want to hear from them, right? I can just think of one leader I'm working with right now, and he's like, I've told them a million times, I want to hear what they're thinking. I want to know. And yet they have had years of being in teams where do not tell them what you think, right? Like you would never do that. So almost sometimes people are bringing their past histories into
Yeah,
that culture.
because they've been
What would
trained.
be
They've been
yeah,
trained.
exactly. So
Yeah.
so what's a move that leader could do? Is there any advice you might give them there of like, hey, they're doing this, but it feels like you're just banging your head against the wall. People don't want to believe that they actually do want to hear from them.
Yeah. Yeah. So we work with organizations that want to retrain in that way, right? And I'm sure you do as well. And so it's really about bringing in that new mindset. So how do you do that? It's the messaging. So the person's already saying it. However, it's also recontracting. Okay. So like in the world of work, you might think that this the way that it works is that I say what's going to happen, then you do it. Okay? We don't want to be that organization. We want to be this organization. So you map out the things that you want to shift, and you talk about it, and then you do that in a collaborative way. So, for example, we were setting up for a project recently, and we got everybody together, and we said, okay, so the culture we aspire to is this, the one of collaboration. How is it that we do that? How is it that we embody that? And how will we know we're doing that? And so everybody had a voice in that. And that's what's really important, because you're trying to get the voice in the room. And the other thing for the leader to remember, which I am constantly reminded of myself, which is that when I'm in a meeting, my voice carries more weight because I'm the CEO. And I need to be mindful of that. And I need to almost dial back so that I can hear other people and then be much more facilitative as opposed to directional. So I think there are a few things going on there. And it is a real pathway. It's a pathway to high performance, but it's a personal development journey. And there are a few things involved that are really, really rewarding to master.
Yeah, I can think about some of the leaders that I've facilitated with their teams. And I remember even just like having a quick little, bathroom break early on because I had to pull that leader aside and say, listen, we're not going to get a lot of collaboration in this room if you keep being the one that answers all my questions when I'm asking questions to the group.
Yeah.
So but just I love how you talked about mapping that out so they understand it's not necessarily even what we're talking about right now. It's about how do we want to have conversations here in
Yes.
in our team, right?
Yeah. And how do we want to feel when we're having those conversations? So there's another exercise in the book, which is about co-created agreements. So when we are setting up, working together, like you with your leader, so you are going to be modeling this. So how are we going to model what we want the group to do? So every time we work with an organization, we reset with their team, because we become an extension of their team. We say, okay, so what we're looking to, the transformation we're looking to see in this organization is what we want to model. And so, and it's an inspiring way of engaging and, bringing people together. And so I can't recommend that enough, that whole consciously creating agreements.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the podcast of just like co-creating the culture, right? And having those mutual expectations, those shared agreements, and of ways of working together and ways of having conversations when conflict comes up. And I love that aspect. It's not something I probably have encouraged people on at all, which is just how do you want it to feel, right? Like just bringing the feelings aspect into it because like the thinking and feeling drives so much of the behaviors. And I think culture is I think a lot of people as leaders focus a lot on the behaviors, the doing. Like I think, think about some great books out there like The Culture Code, and Coyle talks about, culture is what you do. And yet so much of what you do is driven by, thinking, feeling, the mindsets behind it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and how you perceive those as well. So you're touching on something there about the feeling, and I think there's a little bit more there, which is in terms of that we could talk about here, which is about, okay, so what's your dream? How would you love it to be? And what's your nightmare? And that's a really nice way to calibrate with a group of people, or even in a pair, just to understand, okay, so what is my dream for that? And awareness is curative. So as you hear what people want, you hear what they don't want as well, and you're automatically adjusting inside, because people want to, they want to collaborate. That is that great team spirit, that amazing rush that you get when you perform brilliantly as a team. So people really want that, and to enable to create the environment in which people can do that and facilitate people leaning into that. Yeah, it's such a gift.
Yeah, that's a great one there. I mean, I've often shared this question of like a great one is just asking your team, what do you all hope to experience this season? Like, what would just be the best season ever? But I loved looking at like what would be the nightmare situation for us as a team, like where we just can't wait for this season to be over. And then to really start to unpack the behaviors and the thinking that would drive that type of environment and that experience. That's fantastic. I've got a few more before I let you out the door here. One is a big one that, coaches and sports coaches would often say is, well, that player is uncoachable. I can't get through them. They're not coachable. And I guess what would your response be to this coach that just feels like every time that they try to sit down, and whether it's telling a player what to do, or they try to actually, ask questions to drive awareness, that player can just brush them off and be like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Like you might often get that type of response in a sporting environment of like, just, let me do my thing here. Like, I know. You might even hear that like a lot from a refrain from the uncoachable player. Like, I know. You get that. So yeah, what advice do you give to leaders in that situation?
I do think that it comes down to that contracting, that upfront contracting. What do you expect from me, and what do I expect from you? So I do think that goes a long way to addressing that. Your question makes me think of a slightly different scenario, but I think it's quite a nice one, because it's about giving the responsibility back to that person who is not wanting to engage. And so John Whitmore, he used to, travel around the world, and we'd send him into the boardroom because he was a white-haired sir that really, they engaged and resonated with. And this was in the old days, I'd say. That these days, thank goodness, we've moved beyond that. But so one time he gets there and he sees these people who are there in body but not in mind, and so not in spirit. And so he just stops and he says, "Do you want to be here?" And they said, "Well, no, we're just told to come, And he said, "Okay, right. So you can decide to leave if you want to, but if you're going to stay, you have to be fully engaged in this process." And they all stayed.
I love that example. For me, one of the things I call out so often in sports coaching is when players aren't working hard, when people aren't having the right attitude, we resort to the fear-based type of punishment or the rewards type of thing. We go fears, rewards, which is we're going to put them on the line, we're going to yell at them. And that sometimes is effective at driving a little bit of a behavioral change in that moment, but it's not creating the long-term change you want. And so I'm always advocating essentially just reminding them that they are a choice. Like they have a choice to be here. And if you choose, if you want to be here, that's great, but you're going to have to work hard, have a good attitude. And if you don't, that's fine. Then you're choosing to leave. Like you're at choice. And I think so much of really effective coaching is like not just awareness of, say, maybe some of their behaviors and how it might be hurting everybody else in the team, But I think a lot of coaching is helping to bring people back to realize they are at choice. They have a choice in that situation, right?
I so agree with you. And that's the thing. Yeah, it sometimes feels like, the person that you're coaching is driving the car. That's what it feels like, because they are the ones who deciding where they're going. You're just a passenger, and but they need to be driving that car. They can't be sort of yeah. So I love what you're saying. I love the handing over the choice and just reinforcing that, because we in every moment we have a choice about how we behave, and for us to realize that is incredible, because quite often people can get into that victim mindset of, things happen to me and I'm not master of my own destiny. So I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, your story of Sir John Whitmore reminded me of I was coaching my daughter's team of Gaelic football under nines last year, and this one girl, 25 minutes into a 60-minute training session, just goes, "When are we gonna be done yet? I'm ready to be done." And I just I was like I probably like years ago I would have been like, "We're we done when I say so." I'd have probably like gotten annoyed or just like been defensive. And I said, "Hey, listen, we're about to go and do this drill. We're working on whatever, our passing or kicking here. If you don't want to work and get better at that, that's totally fine. You can go hang out there, right? If you're ready, if you're done, that's fine. But we're going to be over here getting better. Your choice, right?" And she just kind of looked at me like, "Huh? Like what?" And yet she's like, and so she's like, kind of like looks at me, and then she's like, "Okay," and she's gonna squeeze us right back in the drill. Never again have I heard this girl like asked to leave there, but it's more like trying to teach the mindset of like, "Hey, you get to be out here is what you're aiming for."
Yeah.
So yeah, so many good things here. I'm really curious in my own experience and going and becoming, being ICF certified as a leadership coach and on this journey. What I have known, which is experienced, is not just my ability to help others, but I have grown through that process of, becoming a performance coach, right? What has been the most impactful thing for you in your journey here in leadership coaching?
I think that finding out that there's another way of doing things. So, I used to be a banker, which I mentioned, and that was all about deciding what I wanted to happen, and nothing would get in my way. And I tell you what, that's very exhausting, number one. Number two, leaves no room for magic. So finding out that actually life is much more of a dance, and extraordinary synchronicity happens as a result of that, has really transformed my life. In terms of, so it's really coaching that opened my eyes to that, because I was doing an MBA after banking when I first saw coaching. And when I saw coaching in action for the first time, it was a 15-minute demo. And I saw a lady who arrived with all the worries of the world on her shoulders. And through this coaching demo, she put down every single piece of, a piece of worry. And at the end of it, she was standing there beaming. And I thought, wow, I want to learn how to do that. And I want to do that for entire organizations.
You can't ever imagine having gone back to banking after that.
So, I have got great memories of banking, but it was like another time, and it feels like I was a different person as well. It's extraordinary, reflecting on, it feels like a different life in a way.
And I'm wondering here too, like if you were to get back into banking, let's say they're like, actually, you can't be a leadership coach. We've revoked your license for whatever strange reason. You're back into banking. You're back there. Like, how would now this experience of being a leadership coach, how would that serve you to be more effective in the banking role?
Yeah. So if I was a banker now, if I walked into being a banker now, I would be a banker on my terms, right? So this is about choice. And so that is incredibly empowering. And the skills that I have now as a transformational leader are the skills that I would have needed to thrive on the trading floor, as opposed to survive. And I could have had it on my terms. And I actually think that that would be a great experiment to do, to send me back in time onto the trading floor. Because, like I said, it was a dog eat dog environment. Interestingly, one of the reasons that I left was because I could not see, I was one of 5 women on the trading floor of 200 men. I could not see a role model ahead of me that was living life in the way that I wanted to live life. And now I am living life in the way that I want to live life. And I think that is the thing that Gen Z are looking for. They are looking to be able to live life on their terms.
I absolutely love that. And I think I can resonate with that on a personal level too, as I'm getting back and even just doing some coaching of my kids teams. Like this journey, this is so valuable to learn these skills, whether you are a leadership coach and you want to make this a profession, or you just want to be a better leader, which is why I constantly refer to this book to anybody that's in sports coaching. I'm like, you just become such a better actual leader, that transformational leader. It helps you to get the mindset right and the skills right, which is obviously what drove you to really write this book. Is there any other motivations that we haven't covered as far as to why you published the newest edition of the book here?
Well, we've had the world has completely changed since 2017, the last edition. And so it's really important to speak to the world where it is now. And I know that a lot of university students, for example, use it. It's the Bible of coaching. And so it deserves to speak to the current paradigm. And if we think back to 2017, pre-pandemic, what a completely different world that was.
Absolutely. A lot of coaches and sports coaches, I've actually have some of my clients that have taken maybe a break from coaching. They've stepped out of high profile head coaching positions to actually go and get certified in this, and then reevaluate. Do they want to get back into coaching, or do they want to do leadership coaching? Like, do they just want to maybe shift careers? It's been really interesting to see the interest, and it's growing in sports coaching. Just for those that are interested in learning more, obviously the book is a great place to start. I so wish I had read this before I wrote my book, The Culture System, because I wrote a lot of the stuff around like coaching conversations based upon my research and work around motivational interviewing. But this you taught me so much through this book. But for those that outside of the book, maybe they want to go deeper, they want to learn more about performance consultants, what would you recommend they check out? What would be some starting points?
So website, performanceconsultants.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can send you in the right direction for what it is that you're interested in, whether it's transformational leader, whether it's performance coach certification, or, maybe it's organizational culture transformation. All of those things that we are working around the world in helping people and organizations do. It's about those change makers who have the dream for how things could be different, and supporting them. So I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I thank you so much for coming to the podcast, and your organization that I follow, have so much respect for, and definitely have goals in mind to get my MCC, my level 3 of coaching from you all, because you are honestly one of the gold standards in coaching out there. So thank you for coming to the podcast and sharing with our community.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with other leaders. For online courses and more, go to tocculture.com, and don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter there, right, to get the episode notes and resources. Thanks for listening in to the Coaching Culture Podcast.